Summit in San Francisco, California at the Westin Hotel, and I'm joined here right now with Jennifer Tejada, PagerDuty CEO. Thank you for joining us, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And also joining us is TC Curry, and TC Curry is a journalist who writes for the News Stack, so thanks for joining us, TC.
My pleasure.
Excellent. So I love the keynote this morning, and I love the skiing analogy, and I did a lot of skiing when I was younger, and one of the things you said to me really was noteworthy about the role of teams, and I thought, team skiing? No. And then I thought, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you're skiing like in the trees and you're by yourself, you don't want to end up in that hole.
You don't want to end up in the tree well like our head of sales.
Yeah.
One of the first kind of exciting ski runs I went on was hiking the Highland Bowl, where you have to carry your skis up kind of to the top of a mountain, and then it looks really scary going down, but like with most runs, you can usually find an easy way and a hard way to get down. And I just remember thinking, if I'd been by myself, I would have never even made the hike up. You almost need the support to keep you going when things are going slowly and when you don't think you can get to the top, etc. And the payoff is so amazing when you're standing up there with a friend or a colleague and you say, look at this, you can share that amazing vista and that reward. So I think almost everything is better when you've got someone to share it with and someone to partner with along the way.
So, in that context then, we talked a lot about the role of teams and how you think about teams and how you think about teams in terms of their workflows and management and everything else. You talk a lot about real-time operations management. Yeah. What's interesting to me is when you think about teams and real-time operation management, it can be an absolute mess.
There's often chaos before there is order.
Yes.
I think the way we are working is changing such that you now have a scenario where you've got multiple teams potentially in different locations running different work streams of a similar process or similar project, and they need to be able to collaborate and work effectively together, even though they might not be able to see each other, communicate effectively, etc., because minutes and seconds count. And so the idea behind real-time operations is it's as much about leveraging technology, but it's more about helping people get the most out of the time and the investment and the tools that they've got to get the best outcome for their customers and for their businesses.
My interest is in how to make this useful for people who are going through this transition, because most companies are in some piece of this or some phase of this transition. And I'm not sure you have done a lot of work in this in making information available, and I know Atlassian has done a lot of work, but I think there's kind of a lot of, it's not always that easy to surface. And I'm interested in hearing how you train managers to learn how to manage these teams, because you've got management training. Some people have management training, some people just get promoted into management, and then all of a sudden you're doing distributed teams, and that's a completely different thing than most of us who've done software development ever had to deal with. And so I'm wondering how much time you put into management training and what sorts of training you gave them to enable them to make this change and make the teams feel supported as they were moving into this completely new world.
Sure. So PagerDuty very intentionally invests heavily and probably ahead of a typical company our size in leadership development and management training. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, I don't see a lot of large companies in the industry really raising and developing the next generation of great general managers the way IBM and GE and Procter & Gamble did back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Right.
So one, I think that we're at risk as an industry of having a real shortage of capable, scaled leaders and general managers. So number one, I think we have to invest in those cohorts that are coming through the ranks for the future. Number 2 is the way we manage has changed dramatically. So when I started my career at Procter & Gamble, which is a wonderful place to grow up, they make a significant investment in young people and their management and leadership capabilities and giving you time to practice and learn how to run teams and build teams. But back then, all the big decisions happened at the top. And the rest of the organization was really supportive and subordinate in some way. It was based on a traditional military hierarchy.
Exactly.
At the pace that the world moves now, decisions have to be made on the fly, closest to the action, which is often down in the troops, so to speak, and employees who are going to make the best decision they possibly can, provided you give them the best possible insights, available to them. And so we look at our management training and our leadership training as being hopefully the new direction for leadership, leading with empathy, at starting with self-awareness and self-discovery, being able to support your teams in building their own careers and learning and taking on new responsibility, even when it might feel uncomfortable, and really stepping back and rather than, leading from the top, being more of a servant leader and leading through others, right? Leading through influencing others to be the best version of themselves. And that also means making sure that those teams have the right tools and the right information available to them. And it also means putting a lot of rigor around progress. So you don't just set goals, you weekly, monthly, quarterly review where you are and focus on the things that aren't going the way you want them to go, and look at where you can improve, and equally look at the things that are going really well and figure out how you double down on those. But creating some rigor and some discipline around performance, I think, is important. And then the last thing I would say is transparency. Like, we're training leaders to be transparent. Now, as you become bigger and a more important company in the industry, you can't share everything all the time, but you certainly can make every effort to help your employees and help your teams understand what it is we're trying to do. Who is your priority? The customer, the end user? What's most important? What is it that we want them to achieve? What does success look like for them? And then what is your role in that? And what do we need by when? And how will we know if you've been successful or not, right? And what happens when you lay that out all very clearly and articulately, it gives young managers and new leaders the opportunity to self-govern. Like, they know where they stand. They don't have to sweat for 2 weeks worrying about, someone like me finding out they're behind. Everybody knows. The numbers are all out there, right? The whole company understands where we are against where we need to be. And it can be as simple as traffic light, red light, green light, yellow light. Things are going great. Things are not going so well. Things need improvement, right? But I think the critical theme is there's a common understanding of what's expected. There's a common understanding of who your first and most important customer is. And there's a common understanding that the team comes ahead of the individual.
Yeah.
The thing that interests me most is, as a former software developer, is the enormous shift that has to happen around failure. Failure is not just expected, but it needs to be planned for and measured against, and not in a punitive way. But it's like, systems are going to fail.
Well, I think the reason that everybody in the industry is so excited about failure is because it's a phenomenal learning opportunity. When I was growing up, my dad used to run hospitals, and the medical staff liked to do ER rotations because it kept them sharp. They would see cases that they wouldn't see in private practice or in their specific area of practice, right? And I think being an on-call engineer is very similar in that you get the chance to troubleshoot under pressure, under time pressure, when the moment really matters and your decisions really matter, and you hone your skills. So failures, actually, incidents should be celebrated, and the people and the way they respond to incidents should also be celebrated. But I think it's also important to practice both failure and the postmortem, the learning process after failure, because I think when postmortems are not blameless, when you don't have high empathy in the okay, what happened? Well, first let's start with factually what really happened, not what we thought happened.
Right.
So you need a system that will give you that data.
Right.
And then when it happened, what did we do and why? What did we learn from that? And what can we do differently now? What do we need to do differently later? Who owns it? And now we're back to discipline. Like, how are we going in terms of working through that action plan?
Yeah.
How are you seeing developers then make this transition? So, the way that we're increasingly seeing it is like, for instance, the new stack reader, most of them are developers, but a lot of them are really young developers. And then you have these far more experienced people who are more on the system, like on the system side of the fence, really.
Yeah.
And so are you seeing these developers then progress into management roles, kind of, and I'm curious about your own experiences and the people who work with you and the customers you're seeing out there.
I think career development's a really unique and personal thing, and so I don't think you can lump in developers or systems people and say, they're going after big careers or not. And to one person, being the CEO might be the dream of a lifetime, and to another person, managing anybody might be the worst thing that ever happened to them. But what I will say is, I don't think we give young developers enough credit for the leadership they already provide through their day-to-day influence in the way we do things, in the way we experience brands, in the way they work together, and how they leverage agile best practices and DevOps culture. And I would certainly tell you that some of our youngest engineers are not only bright, but they're actually teaching people like me who didn't grow up in an agile culture how to run business better, right? How to empower my teams more effectively, and frankly, how to be more vulnerable and empathetic. So I don't think you necessarily need a title to be a leader. I think there's a real opportunity for developers to take advantage of their influence and really change the way their businesses are doing things. One of the companies that I work with from a board perspective is Estee Lauder, and I've been very impressed with a practice that they have in their leadership, in that all of the executives at this huge public company have what they call reverse mentors. So young digital native employees in the business that mentor the most senior executives in the business on what's important to the millennial generation, or what's important from a digital experience standpoint, or how they think about being fulfilled at work and what they want from their careers, which might be different than what we wanted 2 or 3 generations ago. And I think just even having the confidence to be open to something like that as a established phenomenal leadership team is pretty unique.
Yeah, I was talking with Amir Ali, who gave a talk on DevSecOps, and he said the interesting thing about the young developers is that they come in with a DevOps mindset, that they are expecting to have control of the entire pipeline, or access to the entire pipeline.
They come in with a sense of full service ownership, and they can't imagine a situation where they would be, building a release and throwing it over the wall to someone else to manage, right? They feel a deep sense of accountability for that, and I think that's very much our culture. And I guess the good news is, like, in addition to having these developers that feel a deep sense of responsibility, you've also got layers of redundancy, teams that sit behind them or around them or surround them in an on-call engineering rotation that will make sure that if for some reason they're not available, someone is still looking after the quality and reliability and availability of their service. So you're not alone. You have that team backing you up.
And I was just going to go, to your point about, your team likes to be on call. I just wanted to say that that's because everybody's on call. If you have a small team where those people are on call, it's not so much fun. I mean, the
more people on call, the easier it is,
exactly.
Right? So if you're the only small team on call, it's harder. You're going to be paged more out of office hours.
I wrote an article after a talk from the SRE engineer from Google, and the title is "No Grumpy Humans." It's like that's their goal.
Yeah.
And the more distributed the on-call rotation is, the more it does hone your skills,
And the better experience it is for the users and the teams.
Absolutely.
Right? And I also think that being on call and being in an on-call rotation also gives you visibility to what other people are working on in a way that you wouldn't have. It just gives you a broader range of vision to everything that's going on across the business and the dependencies that exist that will either help your service to be great or cause your service to fail. So I think there's some additional learning that comes from that.
So I want to touch on a few other topics you discussed in your keynote. One was particularly about time, right? And how time matters so much. And you talked about, this kind of a concept of how you need to think about time relative to that whole process of, building applications, right? And how you think about that. And real-time operations and how that plays a role. I'm curious from your perspective on, how do you think about that in terms of, the customers who's the transformations that they're going through and what they're experiencing.
Most of the companies we work with, whether they are, a startup cool kid here in Silicon Valley or Silicon Slopes or Silicon Beach, like pick your, tech community, right? Or they're an industry leader that's, built a brand that was trusted by its consumers for a couple of 100 years. They all want the same thing. They all are trying to delight their consumers, to find new customers, and to continue to bring them products and services that have them coming back for more, right? And it's increasingly hard to do that when you have to deal with the digital environment, the mobile, the social environment, the bricks and mortar environment, and the fact that consumers are getting increasingly impatient and finicky about what they want when they want it, and those expectations will continue to be on the rise, I think, for a long time in front of us. And so, when you look at the digital transformation a lot of these companies are going through, whether they're cloud native and they've only been around for 5 years, or they've been around for 100 years and have legacy architecture that they have to manage and work through, they still have the same problem that they're chasing the consumer ideal, right? That they're still behind the pace of the end consumer's imagination in many cases. And even if they can get ahead of it every now and then with a phenomenal brand or product launch or experience, it's not enough to do it once. You have to do it over and over and over again. You have to be amazing when things go wrong. I mean, Zappos is a great example of a company that had a phenomenal reputation for customer service when you got something you didn't like, right? Like their returns environment was one of the things that made them successful. And you look at people being able to personalize their shoes. That has to be easy. Or the ability to configure and buy a car online. If I had told my parents I was going to configure a car and buy it online and never go into a showroom to see it, they would have told me I was like crazy town.
So how does machine learning and AI then play into this kind of concept?
I think the really important thing about machine learning and AI, if provided with deep data sets that are well engineered for models to learn, they can automate some of the mundane stuff that humans don't need to be doing, so that humans can focus on the innovation and the creative work that really has an impact for customers. And likewise, I think machine learning can also help prevent customer impacting disruptions in a web and mobile environment, so that an engineering team can find out that something may be wrong. There is a symptom before the customer catches the flu, so to speak.
You're really busy, and I just want to before you go, just ask a last question.
Sure thing.
About inclusiveness and the importance of inclusiveness in this new world of machine learning and AI.
Look, I think it's human nature to want to belong. When I look to join a board or a company, I look around and I say, is this a community I feel like I'm going to be at home in? Is this a place that I think will bring out the best in me? Is this a place where I'm going to be able to do my best work? And I think that it is critical and essential for leaders to think about not only how do they create access and opportunity for people from all backgrounds, all ages, all ethnicities, but also that they work with their teams to develop and nurture inclusive cultures. Because it's one thing to get someone in the door, but if they're there and then they can't find anybody they relate to, or they don't feel like they're in a position to be successful, or they can't bring their whole self to work, the whole organization is going to fail at some point in time. So I think inclusiveness is about setting the groundwork for every person to have an opportunity to kill it, to be successful. And we use solutions in recruiting, for instance, that use AI to remove bias from the process, for instance, or help us write better role specs that remove bias in our role description. So there's a lot that you can do in every part of the pipeline, but the most important thing that you can do is insist that all of your final candidate slates are balanced, not just one underrepresented minority or female, but half of that candidate slate is balanced, because then you've got at least half a chance of an underrepresented person getting a job in your company. That once those people are in the business, they have a community and a sub-community and a group of people that they can find a sense of belonging with, and that is shepherded and operationalized either through employee resource groups or management training. And then finally, that you celebrate the difference. Right? So I think sometimes people think I'm all about this inclusivity thing because I was a woman. I've had a phenomenal career in tech. And I've not suffered terrifically for it. I feel lucky, and I feel like I've been able to leverage my difference. It hasn't always been easy, but I do this because it's the right thing to do and because it delivers better business results. Inclusivity is about business, and it's a leadership problem, not a diversity problem.
Thank you so much for your time, Jennifer. Really appreciate it. Really thank you for joining us in this conversation at the PagerDuty Summit. Good luck.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your funding.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
You are now, you've been called a unicorn now. And
I don't pay too much attention to those labels.
but
I got a plan and I got a team, and we are going to execute the hell out of it.
And that's it. And it shows. So thank you very
Awesome.
much for your time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.